And
Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your mostly weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts Keith Bogan, Doug
knucklehead.
Hammondike, and Chad Holloway. And apparently, I can't even get through the intro this week without laughing. Anyway, we're off like a thundering herd of turtles. We will be talking about this week something that Doug brought up, and that is disciplining your kids. This should be a very interesting subject. Although we're all different age ranges, the age ranges kind of fit into a certain pattern, it seems like, from what we were talking about. But we will get into that over the next hour or so and discuss this point in life. So, Doug, you came up with the idea. Why don't you kick us off?
Like Jason was saying, we are just going to talk about disciplining, and I was hoping to delve into how my parents raised me and how roles might have changed. How we're raising our kids today, and just growing up in the whole idea with. We came from a very religious background, so of course there was many rules, let's say, and many reasons to break them as kids do.
Right.
And I came from a parents that we had a paddle, and you feared the paddle, and it was mostly administered by my mom. My dad was always slow to anger, as the Bible would say, and when he went off, boy, you did not want to be within his path. And today we're more of a family that we don't encourage hitting, and we don't hit our kids. Usual idle threats work best for us. And the occasional I'm taking away your video games and sit in your room until you figure it out, or both of you sit in your room until you apologize to each other. Type situation going on at our home. So, anybody else?
Well, I'll jump in on that, but I could be talking forever. It's interesting because, not to go down this rabbit hole, but we toyed with the idea of a different topic before we started, and that was politics, which we all know would just get ugly, so we wouldn't want to do that. But when I think about this particular topic, there is no more shining example of how kids are raised in this country and the role models they have in their parents. This is actually one of the most critical topics in terms of looking around at today's youth and trying to figure out how they were raised and why they might be a little bit different or a lot different depending on how you look at it. And the same thing, I think, you take the microcosm of my household. My father was the disciplinarian. My mother was the person who ran interference because my father was wildly over the top in terms of how he did it. Now, he wasn't the type of person to hit, although I understand from my brothers, I'm the youngest of four, and apparently they received the wrong end of a belt or a slap on many occasions when I was too young to remember. But by the time I was old enough to know what was going on, I don't remember seeing a whole lot of that. But my father had a horrifying temper, just brutal. And the smallest things would set him off. So we grew up in a house where we were all literally afraid to do a lot of things. Making noise, moving things out of the place where he had left. He was extremely fastidious. He would run these literal snap inspections of the house to make sure things were where they should be, when they should be, exactly how he envisioned it. Hey, I'm painting this horrific picture of my dad, and my dad actually was not a bad person at all, and he taught me a lot of good things, but he had some personality traits that I wouldn't want anyone else to have, we'll put it that way. So and like I said, my mom would run interference. She knew he was completely nuts in that area. So she would protect us as much as she could when things weren't exactly as he wanted it. And she would sort of guide us to go other places when she knew he was in a mood where he could easily be set off too. He was a great provider. He loved his family in his own way, but his way wasn't necessarily what we would call, he wasn't openly or anything like that. The typical, the prototypical hardline German facade, no emotions or anything like that except negative. And he didn't know how to hug, he didn't know how to say I love you or anything like that. But his way of showing affection was to provide for us. He was a very successful businessman, so we never wanted for anything. We had supplies, we had food, we had a huge house, all that stuff. Taking from those lessons, I rarely would raise my voice to my boys. I think when they were very small, I kind of used my voice as the thing that would pin them in the corner when they did something wrong, so they would learn very early on what to do and what not to do. Not terribly dissimilar from a pet, if you will. You do this kind of the same thing when you're training a pet. But by the time they were 6, 7, 8 years old, they'd already gotten used to that sort of thing, so they didn't necessarily need that more of that. And every now and then I'm pretty good at fixing them with a stare. We've all developed a dad stare, and moms have the mom stare. But in my house, I became the interference. I would run the interference because mom was, for all of her wonderful traits, mom was much more emotional and much more easy to set off, and would get very angry at things that none of us understood. So I learned how to see a lot of that coming and shield them, if you will. But yes, just like Doug said, there was a couple of slaps on the butt, and I remember one distinctly pulling over to the side of the road in the car and leaning back and slapping Justin in the face once when he was about 6 or 7 years old, when he said something really bad. I don't remember what it was, but that was the only time I think I ever slapped him in the face. But so other than that, there was no physical discipline at all. We never had belts. We didn't throw shoes. There was no physical objects. What was that? What was that, Doug?
The chancla. The chancla.
None of that. And occasionally, hey, you can't play your video game. You can't go out with your friends until you do this or do that or whatever. But it was such a different approach that it almost feels like I didn't do any discipline for them when they were growing up, because I came from such a background of constant negative reinforcement and negative discipline. So I feel like I almost did nothing, but my kids seem to have turned out fine.
Well,
Interesting.
I see something. I see a pattern that I should have known where it came from. With Keith.
Uh-oh. Do tell.
Now I know where you got your OCD from.
I'm on the couch and Jason's my psychiatrist right now, so go. Give it to me.
Yeah, now I know where the OCD came from.
Oh, yes. That's very interesting you should say that, because, and Jason's been in my house, so he's seen, particularly since I got divorced, how like everything has a place and everything is put exactly. And yeah, a lot of that did come from my father, and I'm much more comfortable that way. I don't get upset like he did.
You don't. No. I can tell that that's one thing that I can say. You do have OCD, but it's not to the point of.
I have very prideful.
Most people don't.
I love the fact that I put everything exactly where it should go. And I'll laugh about it when somebody moves something, and I'll make big jokes about it and all that. I don't react the way my father did at all. I mean, my father would absolutely explode when stuff was moved. He would have these temper tantrums that it's been a long, long time. Dad's been gone now nearly 40 years. So I sort of have some memories of it, but it's not that strong. Maybe it's faded over time. But I do take pride in that, and you're right. I'm sure that a lot of that came from my father's insisting on things being a certain way and all that. But some of it, I might add, comes from my kids. my kids who, when I was married, let's just say my wife wasn't exactly the neatest person, and she was more of a pack rat. She kept a lot of stuff around. There was piles of stuff all around. And it's particularly my older son looked at me square in the eyes as we were going through the divorce process and said, when this is your house, please, Dad, don't let it be the pigsty that it is now. And it wasn't a please, it was more like, I need you not to let it be that.
Right.
So I've gone out of my way, and Jason's seen it, to like, nothing is ever left out. It's insane.
Right. Makes
You know,
perfect sense.
That's my way of disciplining myself, if you will. But the kids almost are disciplining me to make sure that they have a better environment when they're here than what they grew up with.
Absolutely. So my story is a little different than that. My mom and father were divorced. My dad was my real dad was never a disciplinarian, so to speak. I'd go to his house for fun, and he'd just kind of let us go. I think I told you the stories. I'm 10 years old, without a shirt, without shoes, riding on a motorcycle through the woods. I mean, just like total heathen. We'd go out hunting with guns at an early age, and all kinds of things. But I mean, but that part was good for me as well. When I was younger, and when my mom was single, I would stay with my grandparents. And until I was 6, it was just me and my mom. But I stayed a lot of times with my grandparents, right? So I turned into a little hellion. I was a real problem at that age. And I'm very lucky that my mom married the man she did when I was 6 years old, because I would do things like, I'd wear cowboy boots. And then, like, I remember one time I got home from school, and like at kindergarten, and my grandma wasn't there. So like I went up and was kicking her in the shins. Another time I had a baseball bat, and I was in the front yard, 5 years old, and they didn't open the door fast enough, the front door for me. So I took the baseball bat and I busted out the storm door. So you guys get the picture. So then
this explains a lot.
Hey,
yeah, exactly. So then my mom meets my stepdad, Terry, right? So here Terry comes, and he's like in love with my mom, and my mom's so sweet, right? And then he's like, doesn't know he's got this little devil in her house, that she has this little devil living in her house, right? So my mom's like out one night meeting, or actually talking to her new mother-in-law, and I didn't want to go to bed at that time. So it was just my mom and her mother-in-law. So I got with a pillow, and my mom's back was to me. So I just took that pillow and just like went wham, and about knocked my mom out with my pillow. So her new mother-in-law was like going, "Oh goodness, what's happening?" So I had all this stuff going on. So then my stepdad then gets on the scene. So, I had a lot of things happen, like wash my mouth out with soap on a daily basis, just for my nasty mouth. And then one day I go in, I'm in the cupboards in the kitchen looking for matches. And so, I'm 6 years old. So me and this neighbor boy are out with this other kid who's like 3 years old behind some bushes, teaching him how to light matches. Not a good thing. So here comes the 3-year-old's dad comes up and sees it. Then I see the 3-year-old's dad talking to my stepdad. So I'm like, uh-oh, I've got a problem. So I go in. I remember this very, very vividly and very clearly, even though I was 6 years old. So I go in, I get under my bed, and here comes my stepdad. He goes, Chad, he goes, why don't you come out from under your bed? He says, we need to talk. And I said, well, I'm stuck right now. And he goes, that's okay. He goes, I'm just going to wait here until you're unstuck. So I unstuck myself, and he had this whole discussion with me, because earlier he'd caught me looking for the matches in the house, but I said I was looking for a calculator. He goes, you never lie to me. He goes, and you can't do these things. So that was when he took off his belt and he beat me with his belt for the first time. But also it was a fork in the road for me, because I remember that changed me from going down a very bad path to change me, put me on to being the outstanding citizen I am today. Right. I mean, that was definitely, that was definitely a fork in the road. So, but here's the thing about my stepdad is he never was mad. He was always very rational. He meted out discipline. And that was the only time he did it. He did not want to get physical. And he would explain, he would explain what was going on. He'd be like, now you know that you can't do this. Why did you do that? But the other thing he was good at was he would say the first time, he wouldn't say this, but this is looking back, what I see, the first time you mess up, he gave you a little leeway on it. You'd still get a punishment, be grounded. That was a typical punishment. But if you did it a second time, then he would crush you in some way. You know what I mean? It would be like, listen, we'll give you some leeway, but if you're going to be dumb, then you're going to be treated like you're dumb. So, but that totally made a difference in my life and how I, just with my kids and before my son, I had thought a lot about discipline. And, I use what's called in the books, the logical consequences method. So, I did a lot of research on this because, when we get down to it, we're all animals. We're just higher functioning animals, but we still respond to those positive and negative reinforcements, right?
Mhm.
And so my son was growing up. He's 2 years old. I'm explaining things to him, at a certain level. I don't know if he can understand me or not, but I'm explaining, right? I'm like, you can't do this because of this. I always try to get him to understand how other people would feel if he broke something of somebody else's, if he moved something of somebody else's. Well, how would that make you feel? Kind of the golden rule is what I was trying to internalize in him.
Right.
And I remember I just had to put him in timeout one time when he was growing up. And he typically, he is a good kid. Not that he hasn't done things wrong that he's been punished for, but overall they've been relatively minor. He's been a lot better kid than I was in high school, that I know of anyway. But with a dad like me, there's not an awful lot you can get by me because I probably have done it all, or most of it.
Right.
But so, my whole thing is explain. And even now, like I have these conversations with him and I don't tell him things. I pose questions to him so that he thinks about it. So it's not dad saying, it's him internalizing, him saying, well, what's best? What should I do? What do I want to hurt this person's feelings? Do I want to, but we're kind of past that kind of stuff because he doesn't engage in those kinds of things, but just like him making decisions in his own life. So, but anyway, my mom, Keith, was kind of like yours, I think. And she was just kind of very emotional, high emotion, and would yell. But as soon as she says, I'm going to call Terry, boy, things just dropped right away into place. And like, we're walking the line then.
And that's how she ran interference, because she protected you, but at the same time, she made it clear where you would suffer if you continued to do what you did. So,
Yeah.
Sense?
Yeah. But I still remember my stepdad was very logical. And now that we're talking about dads getting angry, I never ever saw him angry.
Right. Mom was pretty much the handled it largely. Dad worked so much. When I was 6 years old, and he started a business down in Vineland, Millville, which these guys know exactly where I'm talking about. Chad, that it's basically an hour and a half each way. So Dad would drive 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So he wasn't around and wouldn't get home. On a good day, he'd be home by 5. He had an apartment in Vineland that he used, because there was days there were weeks where I didn't see him because of work. But when you own a business, you got to do what you got to do. Mom was pretty much the one who handled a lot of it. Mostly a lot of Mean Mama Stare Down was the what would work mostly with both my sister and I. And you didn't want to piss off Dad, because when he was around, if you pissed him off, look out. There were a couple instances where I pushed a little too far. I'm lucky I'm still here. Never physical, but yeah. you just, even to this day in the business, you still don't want to piss them off. But yeah, he is a very, he can be gruff sometimes. But usually, it was a lot of you can't do this or grounding or stuff like that. That's the way it was. That was, I guess, the time, because growing up when I did, I'm only a few years younger than Doug. That actually really not that much younger than any of you.
Saying you're a lot younger than me. That's it. Rub it in. Very nice.
And I'm a lot younger than you, Keith.
But anyway, no. It was, like I said, it's been, and it's getting more different now. When it comes to the girls, when it comes to discipline, it's a lot of trying to use punishments, grounding, stuff like that. Neither one of us have or will ever use our hands on them or each other. Hope, I've been through that, and it's not something that I ever want to go back to. Anyway, I can't think of any time, and I am the one who gets angry usually. I do. But there hasn't been a time where that's, and as I said earlier, taking out the belt and folding it in half and snap it, that don't work. They laugh at it. They really do, because when I did it makes a funny noise. And it's not because they're not old enough to understand. It's stupid. To me, that's stupid. Things like that are stupid. I mean, I can understand the paddle when we were growing up. I never felt it, but, now, no, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But what actually worked once was we were having trouble with them cleaning their room. And I don't think I ever told you this one yet, Keith. So it was a Sunday morning. I actually, I'm kind of sitting here looking at it going, oh God, because it's starting to get long. Usually I cut the grass on Sunday morning. Every other Sunday I cut the grass. Well, we've been having real problem with them cleaning their room. It had been almost 2 weeks we've been asking them. So I challenged them. I said, and didn't say anything more than, you're going to be in big trouble if this grass is cut by the time you clean your room. Then it became almost, I went, no, flip that, change that a little bit. And I said, all right, I'll race you. Sure enough, by the time I was done cutting the grass, the room was clean. So it was kind of like, what the hell, how'd that work? So, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out a way to continue making that work, but it was an interesting point where I went, oh wow, that worked.
Of course, I did. Trophy generation.
Of course,
everybody gets a trophy.
Of course. Oh no, they didn't get a trophy. I didn't give them anything.
Right, but you gave them the satisfaction of beating you.
But that's okay, isn't it?
Which, by the way, all of us really want to have. We all want to beat you constantly, but that's different.
But Keith, was the room clean?
I wouldn't know. I've been too scared to go in there for the last year.
Oh, no, I wouldn't go in there now, but it was then. And I do mean clean. I mean, under their bed and everything was, I was shocked when I walked in there.
Here's the strategy I think you need, Jason.
Oh boy.
Kids never listen to their parents, but you've seen how well your kids listen to people like me.
It's true.
I should come over and I should tell them to clean the room, and they'll probably do it.
No, they do actually. Actually, they did start doing it yesterday, um, but that was to again. That was to. It was kind of more rewarding because I went and laid and watched TV with them. I forgot what the hell we watched, whatever BS TV show. Or I mean, it's to or the big thing now, and this was something that I was quite surprised happened last night. I was downstairs, needed to switch the laundry, and went looking for something in my clothes, and turned around, and they were taking turns going back and forth, putting the stuff in the dryer. Delana knows how to do it. I was very surprised to see Sadie doing it, the 6-year-old. I went, what? A couple of times I almost was worried she was going to fall in, but because we have a top loader, because honestly, our washing machine, we had like 3 different appliances go down at once in the process of COVID. So I've had to go appliance shopping 3 different times. But I do most of the laundry and couldn't take the front loader anymore because of having a bad back and bending over and the lifting, and it just was not working anymore. So I went back to doing a smaller top loader, which is now actually worked pretty well because my back doesn't hurt as much anymore with doing the laundry. But it was very interesting to watch Sadie literally hanging over the washing machine last night. But again, it was something that I went, wow, they just did it. So it was kind of interesting to Delana. Like I said, Delana has taken up wanting to learn to do things like that, like the laundry. They'll take turns now at this point with I'll take the garbage out and come home and the can is up and I don't even ask anymore because I know one of them is taking the can up from the street. It's a pretty big can too, so it's kind of impressive to see I'd love to see them actually move it up the hill. Actually, I shouldn't say that. My mother and I watched Sadie move it up the hill the other day when I went to drop off my parents' paperwork. We were watching it, and my mother's going, "What is she doing?" I said, "Taking up the garbage can." My mother looked at me like, "She's doing what?" I said, "It has wheels."
She's at that stage. They're both at that stage where it's cool. It's fun to help the parents. Wait till they get to the stage where, oh, it's embarrassing because my friends might see me do it, and then you're screwed. They won't do anything for a while.
Well, that's that. You say that, but one advantage to that is in my neighborhood, none of their friends live anywhere near us. None of them. So
But
that may not really work.
At school, one day they're gonna say, "Yeah, I do this at home," and their friends are gonna go, "Oh, that's not cool. That's not being a kid. You're supposed to rebel." And then they're gonna start behaving the way they're supposed to by their friends' standards. You're gonna run into a wall at some point where they're gonna rebel against it for a little while because they're afraid their friends will find out.
Yep. Parents will become less important and friends will become more important.
Oh yeah. You're benefiting from COVID. COVID's helping you because there's less exposure to that sort of peer pressure influence right now, which is a bad thing because you should have that. That's kind of a natural progression and all that. But at some point, that will return, and you'll run through your times.
It's a fact of life, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fact of life. Every kid does that. I don't care who they are. Every single frigging kid does that.
I say, enjoy it while you got it.
I did it. Elise Elise can tell you that there's holes in the wall in her parents' house from her. So I mean, yeah, every kid goes through that. But now, I mean, Elise kind of thinks that I get bothered by how often she is on the phone with her mother, but it really, it's a fact of life that, I mean, I honestly, I see and talk to my mother more now, and I work with my parents. I talk to my mother more now with her being home because of her shoulder than I did when I worked for them for 5 years, 3 days a week that they were there. Because it just, we didn't talk about much. We just, did our day, and then but now, we talk more because I have to go in and I have to give them paperwork so she can do it, because there's things that I can't do at work. So little changes in life, like what seem to be, and I've learned this. If this is one lesson I've learned in the last 100 days, let's say, the worst things that happen in your life aren't always the worst things that happen in your life. So anyway, like I was saying, when my mother fell and hurt her shoulder, which I haven't really talked about much, get into that one of these days. I've had to drop her paperwork off for her. So yeah, I've seen her and talked to her more often, like I said, than I had pretty much in the last 10 years. My dad too. My dad, for two people who kind of spent the last umpteen years, talking, but not very often. It's been another interesting little twist since that all happened, but I digress. It pretty much, like I said, every kid goes through that. And there's times in life that even as adults, you kind of go, okay. And relationships change constantly. Even with siblings, we could get into that, I'm sure, of how often relationships can change. And how there's times where you just go, the hell with it.
I have a question for you guys. Something that I can't answer, but maybe you can. In your more adult years now, have you ever gone back and talked to your parents about how they raised you and how they disciplined you and how they thought that was the right or wrong way to do it? I asked the question because, my parents have been gone for a long time, so I don't have that opportunity to go back and have that adult conversation with them about the methods they chose and whether or not they felt they were appropriate or accurate or helpful or anything, or whether that they felt like they made any mistakes. But have you had a chance to do that?
Yeah, my mom actually asked me the other week almost that question, but it wasn't exactly how you're phrasing it. It was more or less, do you think what I did was right? More or less, raising these guys the way that I did, and and stuff, and went over some of the joke is about the time my mom went to paddle my brother, who was always getting in trouble, it seems. Can't ever remember a single instance why, but he moved and she hit the oil burner and broke the paddle that time, and that was the end of it, and we never went back to that ever again. But yeah, she was asking, how do I feel about what she did and all, and that she was doing what she thought was right, and do I have any issues about it now? And I said no. I mean, it was important for us, and discipline, and fear basically drove it, and it worked in our household, and I think that after you get battled once or twice, you never want to get it again. But it was also played through also at the Baptist school we were going to, as well as that the principal, was able to paddle the kids. And, the couple kids that did actually receive this, and you knew you never wanted to be called to the principal's office because what would ensue,
Mm-hmm.
But I think the idea of, consequence and understanding that, and and basically, making it a fear factor thing is, is what drove you not to want that to happen. And, so,
Right.
I, it was, like we said, a different time and a different tactic, so,
Can't
yeah, I don't know how my brother feels about it, but yeah,
can't
that's how I should ask him.
you can't remember why your brother or any incidents with your brother, Doug? It's your brother. That's why your brother got into the trouble your brother got into. The little I know about your brother, I can understand why your brother got into a lot of trouble. So it just there are certain people. Well, I can say it this way. All right. Um, the term black sheep is thrown around. I don't think any of us would consider ourselves the black sheep or the bad seed of a family. Am I correct?
Depends on
I
the day, but probably not.
And I'm not just talking immediate family either. I'm talking about extended family. Because I, for one, can tell you that if my sister and I are the black sheep of the family, it's because we're the only fucking normal people of this generation. So, believe me, you've seen in FUBAR, one of my cousins is in there. Trust me, you're going to learn how warped my family really is. So, like I said, I mean, if my sister and I are the black sheep, we're the normal ones. That's why we're the black sheep. So, no, we haven't. I haven't brought that up with my parents. There'll be something to discuss with my mom one day, but I haven't really talked about it. Because I think, in a way, my mother probably, and I think now to an extent my father as well, looks at where my sister and I are in our lives, and no, they didn't do such a bad job. So to answer that question, no, we haven't, but I would say they were fairly successful. Yeah.
So I haven't talked. I never talked to my mom necessarily. My stepdad died a while back, but just like in conversations with them, once my son came along and had to raise him, talking a little bit to them just in general about parenting. There is no book, and you have to do the best that you can. And here's the other thing: even if there were a book, no two kids are the same.
Right.
So everybody's got their own personality based on a variety of things, and behaves a certain way based on a variety of things, and have different things. And so that plays into it. But and I think that's what you have to do. Maybe you look back and you go, "Well, I could have done things different," but at the time, you have to just do the best that you can then, and do the best that you can. And let me make another quick point here. So I think Doug had a good point about like the paddle. And once you get the paddle, you don't want that again, right? So if your mom got out the paddle, you said, "Uh-oh," and everybody's towing the line. And I think Jason, to your point, when you take off a belt and you snap it and the girls laugh at you, it's because that's the extent of it, right? There is no referent. Like, see, I had the referent that the snapping is the end point in your house. In my house, it was the median point. It was like, okay, we snapped it now. I got your attention. The next point is I apply this belt to your butt.
Right.
So we knew what was coming next. So I think there had, and I think that's important in a lot of ways. Is like whether it's with a belt or whether it's with punishment, there has to be a reference so that they understand what's coming next. Because we are logical, right? So we have to explain things, and they have to understand. Doug brought up the idea of consequences. So like the model I use is logical consequences. If you do X, Y will happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do what I say, you're going to be going to your room for the night.
Right.
those kinds of
Right.
things. And, I think the one thing that just in talking to my stepdad, he said, it's very important to have, when I was younger, it's very important that you have consistent rules. You can't have the rules changing. So somebody needs to know what the rules are to be able to follow them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he sets the rules, and then he says the other thing that was important, and it's all logical, right? It's all common sense, but he just put it in a model, and that's how I understand it, is that if you say you're going to do something, if somebody does X, you're going to do Y. If somebody does X, you better do Y. And I tell you what, my stepdad, if I did X, he would do Y. My mom, not so much. And that's why I could get away with a little more with my mom, because I knew where the boundaries were, if that makes sense. I knew that she may or may not do it. But I knew with my stepdad, to Keith's point earlier, he just had to give me that dad stare.
Yeah.
and I knew I'm on thin ice right now, and I need to toe the line here. So
As we got older, my mom had the stare, and we knew better that like she just give you that look, and she sometimes jokes, she's like, "You got that look yet? Can you?" you know. But one thing that more and more I find myself is like when we say something and it doesn't get done, or they do the opposite of what you've said, and we're getting a lot of sarcasm as my son now is just 14, back is one thing that my mom was, you know, uh, really drove home a lot, and I'm starting to become more like this. Is like, well, how many times did you tell them? I told them once, and that's all I need to tell them. That's all I should need to tell them. And usually once or tell them a couple times, but not like hound them or like always like. But when it's not done, then I'm very annoyed or angry or
Right.
you know.
Right.
But it's always like, well, what'd you say? How did you tell them? My wife very clear at it some or whatever, and don't exactly say what I think I said. So, but that was one of the things that my mom always was about. I told you once, I don't need to tell you again.
yep.
Mhm.
Okay. I think the back end of the question I asked, I've often thought about what the conversation would go like with my parents if I had that, if my brothers and I had that. My brothers and I talk every day. Literally, we have some kind of phone conversation as a conference call every day. And we talk a lot about our memories of their disciplinary practices, but obviously they're not here to talk to them about it. But on the back end of it, for our group, in about 10 years, I'm projecting when the girls, when Jason's girls are in college or something like that, or late high school, wouldn't it be great to have another conversation where they were having the conversation and we were listening?
Mhm.
That would be very interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We have to keep this podcast going for at least 10 years. Let's go. Come on.
That's funny.
That's the plan.
But and another thing that I think is real important that I had in my home was that my mom and my stepdad always supported each other. Like I never saw them like my mom never like got in the middle of it and said, "Oh wait, no, don't do that," or "He doesn't need to do that." If one of them was like taking charge of a situation where I had done something wrong, the other one fully supported it. And I actually never saw my parents fight. I'm sure they did behind closed doors, but that's one thing that they kept away from me was they would, if they had a discussion, it was going to be away from me and away from my sister. They would have it on their own. But it was the same with discipline as they supported each other in the discipline. So, there was no playing mom against dad. Now, flash forward to my second wife, and we did not have that support. If I would say something, my second wife would have something to say, or she'd call me the step monster in front of my daughter,
Oh God.
Oh.
daughter. And I mean, it was just that part of it was a nightmare. And then in addition, like, we talk about the discipline, and that's a whole other podcast, is like discipline kids who are step kids in a mixed relationship. Right. So I told her when we got together, I said, if my son does something wrong, I said, you have my full authority to do whatever it takes to discipline him. And she looked at me and she says, well, if you have a problem with Ashley, you come talk to me.
And how long did you stay with her?
Too long, too long. But, it was things like that. And some of it, like you try to work through but that's one place like in that marriage that I go, that was a complete failure, was the disciplining with the kids. There was no consistency. There was a lot of infighting amongst the mom and dad in front of the kids. So right away, and my stepdaughter would jump on that right away. And like, she knew that she could play one against the other.
Sure.
So there sometimes like I would say something to my stepdaughter, and then the phone would ring and it'd be my wife. And she'd be like, hey, what's going on with you and Ashley? Ashley just called me and said, you're being mean. I'm like, well, I asked her to wash her dishes that she left out down here. I asked her to pick up whatever it was, but it was always, but then she knew she could play us against each other. So that whole deal failed miserably. And in addition to kind of that piece of it, then we have one set of expectations for my son, one set of expectations for my daughter. And,
right. And
that was a real problem.
Sure.
So above and beyond the normal disciplinary things.
Well, that would have been a good sign right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I have a question for you. You have a young stepdaughter now, right? Or stepson now, right?
Yep.
Which one? I always get confused.
I've got both. I've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old now.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So when she finally, the plan is for her to come here.
Yes. Yep.
How will that come up in discussion, or has it already come up in discussion?
It has already come up in discussion. And so her and mom are on the same page. And actually we've dealt with this, in the Hispanic households, a lot of times they have multiple generations. So we have an apartment. They live in an apartment. Her mother lives with them.
Oh, okay.
Lives with us, right?
Right.
And so we've already had some issues with Anna, my wife, disciplining her daughter, and then her mom coming in and going, well, why are you doing this in front of the daughter? And I said, listen, I said, you have to talk to your mom. I said, I understand that, but you are the mother, she's the grandmother, and you've got to get that worked out, or you're not going to be effective in managing the household. And so in the past, it's always been, she's always kind of lived under her mom's roof, but now Anna it's Anna's house, right? I mean, she's the matriarch. So it's different. So she needs control of her house, and she needs to control the mood and the environment there and how things operate. And I said, be diplomatic, because, it's that Latin blood sometimes can get a little hot. It's hot. So well, I said,
I'm looking forward to meeting Chad's fourth wife. Okay.
What's that?
I said, I'm looking forward to meeting your fourth wife.
No. But no, we get along real good so far. I mean, but that's the plan, is hopefully I can take all these mistakes I've made in the past and convey that into something good. But, I said it's very important that, for disciplining the kids and just for maintaining peace in the household, that you're very diplomatic, that you talk to your mom, and I know one day she said something like, well, it's because I'm the boss. Soy la jefa. And I said, you said that? And she said, yes. I said, don't say that. I said, I understand you're upset. I said, be nice with your mom. She is your mom. Try to help her to understand. So anyway, we're kind of going through some of these things now, but it's less about us. We're actually working pretty good, I think, as a couple, right, on a lot of the things, but it will be different certainly whenever they are here. Mm-hmm. But for now, going down, things seem to be working, and she understands that what happens when you have multiple viewpoints on discipline operating at the same time.
Right. So, I'm sort of curious, how does Frankie feel about all this?
I think he's okay. I mean, a lot of it happened because he was in his senior year, junior, senior year in high school when kind of all this stuff was happening. And so he was a little out of it. But, he still hasn't met my wife. And so I think he has a little bit of an issue with that. But I'm like, well, son, that's part of an international relationship is we're waiting for the visa. She can't just come here to meet you. And so I think he's maybe a little resistant, but at the same time, I think that he's kind of doing his own thing,
Right.
in school. I mean, he's kind of on his way. And I talked to when he was here during COVID, I talked to him quite a bit, and just said, here's what I'm thinking about for the house and the set and the layout and the setup. I said, are you okay with that? And he just wants his own space. He wants his room in the basement with the door going outside, with a little fire pit there where he can have his buddies over and they can do their thing and have some privacy, at 19, 20 years old that the kids want. So
Right.
I think he's good. And he's going to spend less time here too over the time. But, I talked to him. I would say a lot about it, but I have talked to him about it. So.
Well, I guess being 19, it has an advantage to it instead of being younger. Being younger could be a little bit more difficult, saying 5 or 7 years younger. Definitely could be a bigger issue than being 19. Because being 19, like you said, he really does have an adult life of his own. Whether you would like to admit it or not, he is an adult. So being 19, I'm sure it's a lot different than being younger, like 12, 10, even the same age as one of the stepchildren, 10.
Yeah.
Obviously
Yes.
not 3. 3 would be completely different because she would be a huge part of his life. But being 19, and that's a good thing for him to have that kind of space. Hopefully, there won't be when they meet. We'll just be, hey, that's my stepmom, and that okay. And it won't be an issue at all. There's a possibility it won't be.
I don't think it will because I think that he'll
Seems like
he'll fall right into it because she likes to have a good time. She likes to dance, listen to music, all that kind of stuff. So, and she's closer to his age than to my age. So,
well, that we kind of have deduced.
Probably.
I think we've discussed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they'll have more in common than he thinks, but it is different cultures at the same time. And I think with regard to the children, if he were younger, he'd look at them kind of as competition coming into the house. But now he's past that,
Right.
I pay for what he needs. And if he, he's got his own life he's living now, and his life is not at dad's house now.
Sure.
Just don't ask me to babysit, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right. So now we've come to a point here with in our conversation here where you pretty much can say we grew up similarly, but obviously things were different because of other influences in our lives or things like that. Maybe different places we were raised, different backgrounds of families. I'm sure there was different ways of handling things from place to place, from country to country, from things like that. I know that for me, it was fairly just stay on as much of a straight path as you can, and everything will be okay. And it was, like I said, largely. It just everybody has that moment where they cross a line in their lives. If you don't, there's no such thing as a perfect person. If you say if your life is perfect and you are the perfect child, somebody's full of shit. That's the best way to put it. Somebody is completely full of shit. If you were the perfect child, you're either lying to yourself or somebody is lying to you. That no one's perfect. Everyone fucks up. That's just the way, at least once, everyone fucks up.
Well, it's interesting to watch the group. I mean, between the religious influences in Doug's life and the change of parents, if you will, in Chad's life, and then you got Jason, who dad wasn't always there because he would stay away at times because of his job. Or you got the crazy ones like my dad, who was like insane disciplinarian and insanely strict, and would react to the slightest environmental stimuli in a very, very challenging way. We'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, the generations were similar.
Right.
But we definitely have unique circumstances from each other. I mean, like I look at Doug, and there was no religious influence in my upbringing. I knew what my religion was, but I wasn't influenced by it. Discipline was not influenced by it. Schooling was not influenced by it. I didn't, for better or worse, mom and dad were always mom and dad. There was never a step parent or anything like that. There were times when I wondered if maybe that would have been a good thing, but you can debate that. My father would travel sometimes for work, but he'd be gone like 2 or 3 days at the most. I don't remember him ever being gone more than like 2 or 3 days at a shot. And he would do that like once or twice a month. But although it may not have been that frequent. But anyway, I mean, I do remember him traveling to various parts of this country. Almost never that I remember being outside of this country.
Well, how long was he gone for when the incident happened in Louisiana?
Well, so you're talking about a time when I was extremely young, and I think he was out of our house for a long time. And the incident for Chad and Doug, he was in a hotel on a business trip when a 747 crashed into the hotel and destroyed the entire place, and everyone died. And the only person who survived the conflagration, if you will, was my father, because he was the only one who knew that he had to run through the flames to get out. And he was pretty badly burned in his chest and his arms, hands and such, but he survived. And so the answer to your question, Jason, is I have a vague memory of him being in the hospital for at least several weeks, if not a few months.
Right, because you were talking about it when we were talked about it on the show once a while ago. But yeah, I do remember you mentioning this. That's why I brought it up quick to see,
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be, it's funny. I was 4 when it happened, so I have very, very faint memories of it. I don't remember who my father was before that, and I understand he was a much more physically active person. So, the scarring and all that sort of inhibited his hands and his arms. So he wasn't nearly as physically active, and after that, he would gain weight and not be as, not move around as much. But from a normally planned perspective, he was never gone more than 2 or 3 days. And I have a memory. Of course, Mom was in the hospital every day with him, after the accident. So, we were in some senses there all the time with him, during his recovery as well. None of which I really remember, but like I said, I was 4. So.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, closing, it was just like, kind of like, I was just sitting here thinking about how all the activities we try to get our kids to do and all, and we hope that it provides them discipline. And that's why we choose certain programs over other programs, to hope to bring that to your children, the sense of discipline and participate in different activities, and just building that, outside of the family circle, giving them additional backup on how you should act and stuff. And also you see other parents who are just overly like disciplining their children to the point where everything is like, don't do this, don't do that. And they're just
Yeah.
constantly hollering at the kids. And they could be just as annoying as the kids' actions themselves. Because we
Mhm.
see it here like every day. You know, my kids have actually neighbors and stuff, which, you know, they're over here every day, you know, and you could just see like different parenting styles, you know,
Right.
and what works or what doesn't work, or you don't even notice what is working for your kids. You just want you just know that you're not happy with their actions, so you're constantly just hollering at them, and I don't want that either, you know. uh but yeah, just being able to also, in the end, give your kids guidance is another thing that I probably need to work on more so that, you know, after it's all over, you know, and explaining things, you know, it's probably
Mhm.
something I need to better do with my kids. So that was just a couple things that I, you know.
Yeah, those are some good thoughts, Doug.
And also, yeah, I was also going to say, also, sometimes we feel like parenting superheroes when we do get in a mix with other kids that are outside of our realm, you know, and seeing just how other kids behave, you know, when they're playing on their own and they're not in front of the parents, but, you know, just to see how they just like carry on. We're seeing a lot of the cursing and or being like violent to each other or abusive to each other when the parents aren't around and they don't think you're looking is another thing. That is, how do your kids act, like Keith said, you know, when you're not around, and when you do see them, and how your kids are acting. And you know, my Colin is like, you know, let's call him the tattletaler, because he knows what's right and what's wrong, and he'll be the first one to come in and say, hey, you know. And then we have to decide, you know, well, is it really that important, or, you know, you just tattling on somebody, you know.
Right.
But seeing more and more what other kids are doing, and you just think to yourself, wow, you know, my kids don't act like that, you know, sometimes. And then hopefully that is true, you know. So just a couple things there.
Yeah,
I,
those are good. I think, Doug, that leads up to when you hear your son saying something's going on, and is it something you want to take action on or not, whether it's with your kids or with other kids. That's something that I think is very important. And Keith will probably back me up on this, I think. But for Jason and Doug, picking your battles, especially as they age, because there's going to be some times when it's like, okay, are they doing overall? Are they good? And am I going to get upset if they do this small little thing here or respond to me in a certain way? If in general the big picture looks good, because some of that, you know, especially once they hit the teen years, you're going to have, well, in my case, I had more battles, if you will, but you have to pick and choose which ones are important. And the other thing, I guess, in conclusion as well, is one thing I really tried to foster with my son, and that my stepdad always tried to foster with me. And you'll recall the story I told at the beginning about waiting under the bed and getting the belt. That was not because I was lighting matches. That was because I had lied to him. And he
Right.
said, "Don't lie. You cannot lie to me." He goes, "People are going to do bad things." He says, "But I always want you to tell me the truth." And so that
Right.
really stuck with me at that time. I mean, my stepdad had taught me a lot. There were a lot of lessons that I learned from him, right? And so I've tried to really foster that with my son as well. I'm like, I just want you to be honest. Just tell me what you're up to. If you go out and you make a mistake, or you're out, you're drinking, and you need to ride home, I said, call me. Just be honest. Don't try to hide things from me. You know, we'll have a discussion about it, but I said, your safety is the most important thing to me, and I just want you to be honest about what you're up to and what you're doing with me. You know, so I've really tried to focus on that. So that's kind of my two conclusions are consistency, honesty, and then I guess the third thing would be picking your battles as your children age through the teen years.
You're
Right.
right on track there. Yeah, I absolutely will back you up. Some of my favorite memories of my boys growing up, who are now, as I've said, 18 and 21, but when they were young, you know, single digits, or, you know, older single digits, or young teenagers or something like that. What did two boys do when they're growing up in the same house? Well, they'll wrestle, they'll fight. And although my now ex-wife and I usually agreed on how to handle them, there were times when she couldn't handle, she just would lose it. So the boys would go into the living room, they'd be wrestling and beating the crap out of each other. and she'd be throwing this tantrum. Oh, this is terrible. This isn't the way boys should behave. This isn't appropriate behavior. What are you going to do about it? And I would just like,
Challenge them.
I would grab my book and walk in the other room and say, let me know when you're done. Because that's what boys do. They're just going to wrestle with each other. I wouldn't be surprised if Sadie and Delana did that, for crying out loud. I mean,
No, never,
so
never.
It's not just pick your battles, but also recognize what is appropriate and what isn't. And boys wrestling is totally normal. They'll figure it out over time. They always knew the standing rule was don't break anything. You can kill each other. I don't care, but you better not have any broken bones, and you better not break anything around you.
Says the guy with the collection of Star Trek memorabilia in a big glass.
Right. So they couldn't go near. You to this day when they wrestle, you would hear them say, "Oh, wait a minute, we're too close to the China cabinet. Can't get. We gotta move." And they'll stop and they'll go over to the other side of the room and then they'll jump each other again. I mean, that's just the way it is. One of my favorite memories of my mother's way of disciplining. I wanted to do everything my father didn't do in that area because we were all terrified of just breathing. And we never even knew why. Especially as young kids, we just didn't understand why he was so insanely crazy about so many things. But my mother, I think, I learned a lot from her, and I think I'm a lot like her. This was her method of discipline. She would just stare at you, and her fingers would tap.
Mm-hmm.
And she would tap and tap and tap on the table. Unfortunately, usually she would have a cigarette in her left hand and she'd be tapping her fingers with the right hand. But when mom started tapping her fingers, you knew you'd screwed something up, and you knew you had to stop and assess what you were doing and figure out what was wrong.
Right.
And to me, that's such a better way of getting kids to learn how to do the right thing.
That's a good point. And you're talking about picking your battles. There's one battle that it wasn't even picked, and it's just not gonna be picked, because I fly by one motto, and I've said it before here. I'd rather have the kids call somebody a fucking asshole than be the fucking asshole. So that cursing's gonna went out the window immediately, pretty much. As for the rest of it, I pretty much am in agreement with a lot of what's been said, and it seems like probably the best model, if there was going to be a model to follow here, would have been pretty much the same model of what Chad's stepfather took, or Keith's mother. Keith's mother, yeah, probably that seems very similar to mine. So. That pretty much, I believe, is going to wrap us up for this week. Where we go from here, it seems to be an open question and up in the air until pretty much the last minute, just like today's was this week. We will see from here. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.
Have a good one, guys.